The rain, a relentless metronome, taps its rhythm against the window panes of your solitary existence. Each drop, a tiny hammer, strikes a memory, an echo of the life you once commanded. The scent of stale coffee and forgotten ambition clings to the air, a permanent fixture in the small apartment that has become your sanctuary, or perhaps your prison. Your hands, once quick to draw conclusions, now trace the worn spine of a forgotten book, the words blurring, unread. You are Seth Corbin, and the world outside, the world of sirens and shadows, had long ago ceased to be your domain. The shrill clamor of your ancient landline, a relic in an era of sleek devices, slices through the quiet. It is a sound you rarely hear, a forgotten melody. Hesitation grips you, a familiar chill. To answer is to invite the past, to unseal the tomb of your disgrace. Yet, a flicker, a stubborn ember deep within, demands you reach for it. You lift the receiver, the plastic cool against your ear, and a voice, strained and urgent, spills forth. Seth? It's the captain. You need to come down, now. No pleasantries, no preamble, just a demand, sharp as a broken shard. The captain, a man whose trust you shattered, whose career you inadvertently jeopardized, would not call unless the ground itself were splitting. A knot tightens in your gut. You utter a single word. Where? And the address, a beacon of money and power, is spat back at you. The city, a sprawling beast of glass and steel, glares under the bruised twilight sky as you navigate its arteries. The familiar thrum of its pulse, once a comfort, now feels like a warning. You pass the flickering neon signs, the hurried faces, each a fleeting story, none your own. The weight of your past, an invisible cloak, presses down, heavy and suffocating. The elevator ascends, a silent, swift ascent to the upper echelons of wealth, each floor a click closer to the unknown. When the doors glide open, you step into the hushed tension of a penthouse boardroom during an emergency call. The air crackles with unspoken fear, a palpable current that prickles your skin. The room is a testament to opulence. Polished mahogany gleams under recessed lighting. A panoramic window offers a dizzying view of the city's glittering expanse, and a vast, empty table dominates the space, a silent witness awaiting a terrible truth. Several figures are scattered throughout the room, their faces grim, their gazes fixed on a large monitor displaying grainy images. The captain stands near the screen, his broad shoulders hunched, his usually stern face etched with a profound weariness. His eyes, when they meet yours, hold a complex mix of resentment and desperate need. Seth, he begins, his voice low, strained. I wouldn't have called if there was any other choice. You nod, your gaze sweeping the room, settling on the images on the monitor. The images are of a crime scene, undeniably. But it's not just any crime scene. Tell me, you demand, your voice rough, unused to its own sound. A younger detective, her face pale, steps forward, clutching a tablet. Victim is a well-known financier. He was discovered about an hour ago by his executive assistant. No forced entry, no immediate signs of struggle. The scene, it's meticulous. Meticulous. The word hangs in the air, a sinister bell tolling. You step closer to the monitor, your eyes devouring the details. The placement of the body, supine on the Persian rug, a single white lily clutched in its lifeless hand. The precise, almost artistic arrangement of scattered papers on a nearby desk. The captain's eyes, usually so guarded, widen almost imperceptibly. You see it too, then? The younger detective looks between you and the captain, confusion clouding her features. See what, sir? We're still processing. It looks like a robbery gone wrong, but the lack of struggle. It's not a robbery, you state, your voice gaining a newfound steel, a forgotten authority. Look at the lily. Always a single white lily. and the way the room is staged. It's not about what's taken, it's about what's left behind. Your gaze returns to the captain, locking with his. The precise, almost ritualistic nature. The victim's profile. Financially successful, well-connected, but with a hidden vulnerability. The captain runs a hand over his face, a gesture of profound exhaustion. The medical examiner is already on scene. But preliminarily, the cause of death appears to be an overdose of a rare sedative, administered orally. No struggle, as you said, just peace. Peace. It was the same method, the same bizarre signature that haunted your dreams for years. Samuel Thorne. Same method. Same Lily. The younger detective stares at you, her tablet forgotten in her grasp. The other officers exchange uneasy glances. The captain, however, simply stares at the monitor, a haunted look in his eyes. "It's not just similar, Seth," the captain finally says, his voice barely audible above the hum of the city beyond the glass. "It's identical. Every detail, down to the specific strain of Lily." He turns, his gaze unwavering, pinning you. "He's back, Seth, or he never left, and we need you to tell us why." The city lights outside the window blur into a shimmering, indifferent expanse. The rain continues its relentless drumming. The labyrinth has claimed another victim, and the phantom killer, it seems, has finally decided to reveal his hand, drawing you back into the very nightmare you thought you had escaped. You are not just observing. You are caught again, tangled in the threads of a meticulously spun web. The city lights outside your window blurred into a shimmering, indifferent expanse. The rain, a relentless drummer, hammered against the glass, a rhythm that echoed the disquiet thrumming beneath your skin. You are Seth Corbin, and the cold case that destroyed you has just opened its eyes, a ghost from your past demanding your return. The labyrinth has claimed another victim, and the world you had so painstakingly walled off began to crumble. The shrill insistence of your phone tore through the quiet gloom. The caller ID, a name you hadn't seen flash across your screen in years, sent a jolt through your weary frame. It was the detective, his voice strained, stripped of its usual bravado. "Seth," he rasped, "I know you're out, but we have a situation. Sterling Building, penthouse boardroom, now, an emergency, for them, perhaps." Yet the word situation hung heavy in the air, a silken thread pulling at the frayed edges of your resolve. You knew, with a certainty that chilled you to the bone, what kind of situation could bring the detective to your door, to your phone, after all these years of deliberate silence. The ride across the rain-slicked city was a blur of neon and reflection. Each splash of a tire, each distant siren, seemed to draw you closer to an inevitable reckoning. The Sterling Building, a glass monolith piercing the bruised sky, loomed with an almost malevolent presence. Its polished lobby, usually a hum of corporate efficiency, was now hushed, populated by the ghost of unspoken anxieties. Around the polished mahogany table sat a handful of officials, the chief of operations, a city councilor, and several other detectives whose faces were grim masks of exhaustion. But your gaze locked onto the detective, his eyes, usually sharp and penetrating, now clouded with a weariness that mirrored your own. He stood as you entered, a silent acknowledgement of your reluctant arrival. "Seth," he began, his voice low, "thank you for coming." You offered no reply, only a slight inclination of your head, your eyes scanning the room, absorbing the charged atmosphere. He was found this morning in her loft. He gestured vaguely towards the screen, but you kept your focus on his face, the subtle twitch of his jaw, the flicker of fear in his eyes. "And you called me," you stated, the words flat, devoid of emotion. It wasn't a question. You knew why. "The circumstances," he pressed, "they are unsettlingly familiar. a precision in the placement of the body, the specific, almost ritualistic arrangement of objects around her. The victim's left hand, Seth, resting on a single, perfectly preserved crimson rose. The crimson rose. A signature, unmistakable, etched into your memory with the acid of failure. It was the detail that had haunted your dreams, the macabre flourish of a killer who reveled in a perverse artistry. The incision, you murmured, your voice barely audible, a phantom echo of past horrors. Where? The detective flinched, a subtle tremor passing through him. A shallow cut, just beneath the collarbone. Clean, no struggle, no defensive wounds. He paused, his eyes pleading with yours. And the symbols, Seth, etched into the wall above her head, the same geometric pattern. Faint, almost invisible, but there. A tremor, not of fear, but of a grim, terrible awakening coursed through you. The geometric pattern. A detail so obscure, so specific, that it had been dismissed by most as random graffiti in the old case files. Only you had seen the deliberate intent, the unsettling symmetry. You had argued, you had pleaded, but your theories had been drowned out by the clamor of the more conventional minds. They dismissed it then, you said, your gaze hardening. They called it conjecture, the ramblings of a man too close to the edge. We were wrong, Seth, the chief of operations interjected, his voice gruff, laced with shame. We see it now, the pattern, the precision. It's him, or someone who studied his work meticulously. The words were an admission, a bitter vindication that tasted like ash. Your career, your reputation, shattered over a truth they refused to see. And now, that same truth had resurfaced, demanding its due. Her name? You asked, the question escaping your lips before you could stop it. A small crack in the wall of your indifference. Ilara Vance, the detective supplied, his voice laced with a renewed urgency. A promising sculptor. No known enemies, no obvious motive. No obvious motive. Just like the others. Victims chosen not for who they were, but for what they represented. Or perhaps, for the canvas they offered. You walked towards the large screen, the images now resolving into stark, disturbing clarity. The crimson rose, vibrant against pale skin. The faint geometric pattern on the wall. This wasn't just similar. It was a continuation, a new chapter in a narrative you thought had ended in your disgrace. Anger at the killer who had returned. Anger at those who had doubted you. And most profoundly, anger at yourself for the failure that had allowed this specter to walk free. The labyrinth had indeed opened its eyes, and you, Seth Corbin, were being pulled back into its depths. The resistance was still there, a weary protest against the inevitable. But beneath it, a determined spark had ignited. The crimson rose, vibrant against pale skin. The faint, almost imperceptible etching on the victim's wrist. A delicate, interwoven knot that caught the light, then vanished as the image cycled. Each pixel a shard of a nightmare, reassembled for official consumption. The city's pulse, usually a vibrant hum beneath your feet, felt muted, suffocated by the urgency of this new terror. A lead investigator, sharp-suited and grim, gestured with a laser pointer. Forensics are still on site. Preliminary assessment points to a ritualistic signature, identical to the Rose Killer series from 2 decades past. His voice, though calm, held the tremor of profound unease. Your own name, once associated with that very phantom, hung unspoken in the charged space. You were an unwanted ghost in this assembly, a relic of a failure they couldn't quite discard, not when the past had resurrected itself with such chilling precision. No forced entry, no struggle. The victim, a freelance architect, found in their studio apartment. The investigator's gaze swept across the faces of the assembled officials, carefully avoiding yours. The single rose, the precise placement, It's a mirror image. But your eyes, honed by years of obsessive study, saw beyond the obvious reflections. The rose, yes, a flawless crimson. But the stem in this new image seemed impossibly long, almost theatrically so. And that knot on the wrist. It wasn't just decorative. It was a specific kind of maritime knot, a true lover's knot, intricate and complex, not merely a simple binding. You remembered the old files, the grainy photographs from the original cases. The roses then, while perfect, had shorter stems, more natural. And the bindings, if they could even be called that, were crude, almost an afterthought, not the deliberate symbolic artistry you now saw. The method is identical. Another official, a woman with tired eyes, interjected, her voice tight. The precision, the lack of struggle, the signature. It's a resurgence. Resurgence, you thought. A bitter taste on your tongue. Or an evolution. This was not merely the same hand returning. This was a hand that had refined its craft, deepened its message. The old cases were brutal, yes, but almost raw in their execution. This new one, despite its horrific outcome, held an unsettling elegance. They were seeing a ghost. The official narrative, already forming, was a comfortable echo of past failures. A simplification. It would lead them down the same dead-end paths. Any new details from the scene? You asked. Your voice a low rasp, cutting through the hushed tension of the boardroom. Heads swiveled. The lead investigator frowned, clearly annoyed by your interjection, but he answered. A faint residue found on the rose petals. Still being analyzed. Nothing conclusive yet. Residue. You filed that away. It was another thread, thin but new. The meeting continued, a drone of procedural updates and frustrated speculation. You listened, but your mind was already elsewhere, sifting through the dust motes of memory, pulling up the faces of the old victims, the nuances of their scenes. The officials were trapped by the past, believing the killer was a dormant entity that had simply reawakened. But you knew better. A phantom doesn't sleep. It waits, it learns. When the emergency call concluded, the holographic images dissolving into the boardroom's polished surface, you moved with a quiet purpose that belied your inner turmoil. You slipped past the departing officials, their hurried footsteps echoing the frantic pace of a city suddenly on edge. You needed the files, not the sanitized versions in the official archives, but your own, the ones you'd hoarded, the ones filled with your scribbled marginalia, your desperate, discarded theories. The drive to your cramped apartment was a blur of neon and rain-slicked asphalt. The city lights, once a comforting blanket, now felt like 1,000 accusing eyes. No time for the whiskey that usually beckoned. This was a different kind of thirst. In the back of your cluttered study, behind stacks of forgotten books and overdue bills, sat the evidence of your undoing. A series of worn cardboard boxes, each labeled with a date, a victim's name. Simply, Rose Killer. The smell of old paper, of faded ink and stale defeat, rose to meet you. Your fingers, calloused from years of gripping a service weapon, now trembled slightly as they reached for the oldest box. You pulled out the file on the very first victim, a student named Sarah. The crimson rose, yes, but the stem was shorter, almost stubby. And the binding on her wrist, a rough cord, crudely tied, a functional restraint rather than a symbolic gesture. You flipped through the other old cases, the images blurring into a macabre gallery. Shorter stems, rougher bindings. Then you found it. Tucked within the brittle pages of the second victim's file, a photograph taken by a lesser-known crime scene technician, one overlooked in the initial rounds of review. It was a close-up of the victim's hand, and there, barely visible beneath the rose, was a faint impression on the skin. Not an etched knot, but a faint, almost invisible mark. A singular delicate line, like a fresh scratch, perhaps from a thorn or a subtle, almost accidental brush with something sharp. You held the old photograph beside a printed still from the new case. The new image, sharp and precise, showed the interwoven lover's knot, an intentional, deliberate piece of art. The old faded photo revealed only that single, almost accidental line. It wasn't a resurgence. It was a progression. The killer hadn't just returned. They had evolved. The crude mark of the past had blossomed into the intricate knot of the present. The subtle, almost accidental scratch had become a deliberate, meaningful symbol. This wasn't a copycat, nor was it a simple repeat performance. This was the same hand, older, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous, perfecting its ghastly craft over 2 decades. And the official channels, blinded by the superficial similarities, would never see it. The phantom killer had never left. And now, you were staring at their masterpiece. Your gaze drifted, not to the cityscape glittering below, but inward, through the dust motes of memory. You saw the old victims, their faces flickering like faulty projections, the nuances of the crimes that had, for so long, been only echoes in the chambers of your mind. The residue, a faint whisper of something familiar, clung to the edges of your thoughts, a tantalizing scent you couldn't quite place. The lead detective, a woman whose sharp eyes missed nothing, was detailing forensic findings from the latest scene. Her voice, usually a steady current, held a tremor of frustration. You absorbed the data, filtering it through the sieve of your own past investigations. The meticulousness, the almost ritualistic staging it was all there. A ghost reaching from the grave of your career. Then, a sudden jarring shift. A junior officer, pale and breathless, pushed through the heavy doors, a small, nondescript package held gingerly in gloved hands. All eyes pivoted, the collective tension in the room thickening like cold molasses. The lead detective's brow furrowed, her attention snagged by the unexpected interruption. "What is it?" Her voice, now sharp, cut through the quiet. "Found at the victim's residence, detective," the junior officer stammered, his gaze flicking to you before quickly darting away. It was, in a secure, hidden compartment, addressed specifically to Seth. Your breath hitched. The name, your name, hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. The lead detective approached the junior officer, her movements deliberate. She took the package, a plain brown paper cube, tied with a thin, almost invisible twine. Her eyes, cool and analytical, met yours across the polished mahogany table. There was no accusation yet, only an unasked question, an emerging suspicion. With a practiced hand, she cut the twine, her movements precise. It was no larger than a man's palm, exquisitely crafted, with a silver clasp that glinted under the boardroom lights. "This is unusual," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "No fingerprints on the wrapping. Box is clean." She unlatched the clasp. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay not a message, not a bomb, but a single dried white orchid. Its petals, once pristine, were now brittle, a ghost of their former beauty, yet instantly recognizable. Your mind reeled. The white orchid. A detail never released to the public, never mentioned in any official report. A piece of information so obscure, so intimate to the investigation, that only a handful of people could possibly know. And chief among them, you. The white orchid, you breathed, the words escaping before you could restrain them. The lead detective looked from the orchid to you, her face a mask of controlled inquiry. "You recognize this, Seth?" Her tone was devoid of judgment, yet heavy with implication. "The one that ended my career." You met her gaze directly. A challenge in your eyes. A witness claimed to have seen it. We never found it. It was dismissed as a fabrication. A colleague, a stern-faced man with graying temples, scoffed softly. A fabrication that's now reappeared, addressed to you? Precisely, you countered, ignoring the implied accusation. It's a message, not just to the department. To me. You walked to the table, your eyes fixed on the fragile flower, then on a small, folded piece of parchment tucked beneath it. There's more. The lead detective, without a word, extracted the parchment. She unfolded it carefully. Her eyes scanned the elegant script, then widened almost imperceptibly. She handed it to you, her fingers brushing yours, a fleeting contact charged with unspoken questions. The words were few, etched in ink as black as midnight. Some threads are never cut, Seth. This wasn't just a similar crime. This was a direct communication, a taunt from a ghost you thought you had buried. The determination, long dormant, now burned bright. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was personal. The pressure was immense, a tangible weight on your shoulders, but with it came a clarity, a grim resolve. You would find them. You had to. Your life, what little remained of it, depended on it. The cold certainty, a leaden weight, had settled deep within your gut. It was a phantom ache, a familiar phantom. Not just a similar crime, no. This was a voice from the grave you'd meticulously dug, a direct address from a ghost you'd once believed interred. The killer hadn't merely returned. They had been watching, a predator patiently observing, waiting for the precise, exquisite moment to pull you back into the labyrinth. The air, filtered and cool, carried the faint, expensive scent of polished mahogany and a bitter undertone of fear. Before you, a panoramic window framed a city indifferent to the fresh stain of violence. You felt a disquieting kinship with the glass, both reflecting a world you were not quite part of, yet irrevocably bound to. Around the colossal obsidian table, a dozen faces were etched with a blend of fatigue and grim resolve. Each image, a fresh wound, a fresh taunt. A recent highly public dispute over intellectual property, substantial financial losses for our suspect, and a history of volatile behavior. On the screen, a stern, middle-aged man with thinning hair and a suit that seemed to chafe his shoulders glared out from a booking photo. The details piled up. A forced entry, clumsy yet effective. A struggle, brief but brutal. The familiar, chilling signature left at the scene, mirroring the old case with a grotesque fidelity. The motive, the means, the opportunity, all meticulously laid out, a seemingly airtight narrative. You listened, a silent observer, your gaze drifting from the suspect's face to the subtle movements of the other officers. You noted the way a uniformed officer near the door shifted his weight, the almost imperceptible nod of a forensic expert. They were buying it, the palatable truth, the easy answer. A disgruntled partner, a crime of passion fueled by greed and betrayal. It fit, a neat, horrifying package. But something snagged in the tapestry of their certainty. A flicker of unease, like a draft in a sealed room. The lead detective spoke of a haphazard entry, yet the precise, almost ritualistic arrangement of objects around the victim's body contradicted the notion of a panicked, rage-fueled killer. The meticulousness of the aftermath felt at odds with the supposed impulsiveness of the act. Your eyes drifted back to the screen, to a close-up of the victim's study. Amidst the overturned books and scattered papers, a small, intricate wooden box lay undisturbed on a corner desk. A collector's piece, certainly. The kind of object that would be instantly noticed, perhaps even taken, by someone plundering a high-value residence. Yet it remained, unscathed, untouched. The suspect's alibi, the assistant detective droned, is weak. He claims to have been alone at his cabin upstate, no witnesses. Your mind, a silent crucible, began to forge connections. You remembered the old case, a similar detail. a seemingly insignificant item left behind, ignored, while more valuable possessions were scattered, broken. Each time, the killer had left behind something personal to the victim, something that spoke of their quiet passions, their private world, yet was not of obvious monetary value, something that would only be appreciated or even noticed by someone who truly knew the victim or had studied them with an almost obsessive dedication. The disgruntled business partner, the man on the screen, was known for his ruthless pragmatism, his singular focus on profit. Would such a man, in a fit of rage or calculated revenge, leave behind a delicate, intricate wooden puzzle box? This wasn't just about a business dispute or a financial vendetta. The killer wasn't merely reacting to a slight. They were crafting a narrative, leaving carefully chosen breadcrumbs, knowing full well that eyes like yours would eventually follow. The official investigation, chasing the scent of a red herring, was being expertly manipulated. Rain lashed against the panoramic windows, a relentless rhythm mirroring the frantic pulse in your temples. You stood apart, a phantom in the periphery, the glowing screens painting a shifting mosaic across your face. Images flickered. A sprawling estate, forensic markers, the sterile glow of a crime scene. Your eyes, however, were fixed not on the bloodied carpet or the overturned furniture, but on a corner of a frame, a minor detail, almost an oversight. The victim, a collector of antiquities, a voice, sharp and disembodied, stated from the speaker. Wealthy, reclusive, standard forced entry, but nothing of obvious value taken, just chaos. Your gaze narrowed on the projected image. A mantelpiece, shattered porcelain, a bronze figurine lying on its side. But beside it, untouched, almost pristine, sat a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was the kind of piece a true connoisseur would appreciate, a testament to lost craftsmanship. Yet it lay there, ignored by the hypothetical thief, while less significant, more ostentatious items lay strewn and broken. You remembered. The old case. A similar detail, a persistent echo in the cavern of your memory. Heads turned. The detective, hunched over a tablet, glanced up. "It's just a box, Corbin." The detective's voice, a weary sigh, crackled through the room's sound system. "Expensive, probably, but not a safe, not a jewel case. Empty, we think. No prints. Clean." "Look closer," you pressed, stepping toward the holographic display, your shadow falling long and distorted across the polished table. "Is there a specific mark? A pattern? Anything at all that seems out of place?" The detective on the call paused, a rustle of paper, a murmured exchange. Then a new image materialized on the screen, zooming in on the wooden box. The camera panned, revealing the delicate inlay, the polished grain. And then it honed in on a corner. A single, almost invisible scratch. Not a gouge of violence, but a precise, almost deliberate scoring, forming a tiny, perfect V. A jolt, sharp and visceral, shot through you. An impossible precision. Then the rare stamp collection from the second victim's study, a single foreign stamp, inconspicuously placed upside down amidst a sea of carefully curated domestic issues. Not damage, not theft, but an alteration. A subtle, almost imperceptible deviation from the expected order. The V on the box, the 1111 on the clock, the inverted stamp. They weren't random acts of vandalism or careless oversight. They were too precise, too deliberate. The killer wasn't merely leaving objects, they were leaving messages. "The clock," you murmured, half to yourself, half to the silent room. The hands were set at 11:11. A mirror image, a symmetry. The detective on the call, clearly confused, interjected, "Corbin, what are you talking about? That was years ago." "And the stamp," you continued, ignoring the interruption, your voice gaining momentum, a grim current beneath the surface. "Upside down. An inversion. A reversal of order." Your eyes snapped back to the projected image of the wooden box, to the tiny, perfect V. And now, this. A V. A vector. A deviation from the line. The pieces, disparate and seemingly meaningless for so long, began to click into place with an unnerving clarity. It wasn't about the object's inherent value nor their destruction. It was about their manipulation. The killer wasn't interested in material gain. They were interested in control. In leaving a signature that only a mind attuned to such meticulous detail could ever hope to decipher. It's not about what they took or what they broke, you said, your voice rising, cutting through the ambient noise of the emergency call. It's about what they left, and how they left it. You pointed at the screen, at the tiny V. Each one of these objects represents a specific craft, a pinnacle of human artistry. Horology, philately, marquetry, and each one has been subtly altered. The clock's time, the stamp's orientation, this V mark. The room was utterly silent now, the voices from the speakerphone momentarily forgotten. All eyes were on you, a mix of skepticism and dawning comprehension. They're not just leaving a mark, you explained. The words tumbling out, fueled by a sudden, terrifying insight. They're creating a pattern, a geometric progression perhaps, or a numerical sequence. This wasn't just a killer. This was an architect of chaos, a meticulous artist of disruption. A very precise, very personal message. A shiver, not of fear, but of primal recognition, traced a path down your spine. The phantom killer had a voice, and it spoke in subtle, silent codes. The chilling realization settled like a frost on your soul. The killer was not merely taking lives, but sculpting a narrative of disarray. Each scattered trinket, each seemingly random object left at the scenes, was a word in their twisted lexicon, a deliberate stroke in a larger, more sinister design. They weren't just ending stories. They were rewriting the very fabric of stability, orchestrating a grand, brutal disruption. This wasn't a monster born of impulse, but a meticulous craftsman of chaos, and the signature items, once whispers, now screamed a hidden message. The pattern, once a phantom, began to coalesce. A specific type of antique compass, a rare strain of dried orchid, a fragment of obsidian etched with a forgotten symbol. Separately, disparate. Together, a constellation. They pointed not to a person, but to a sphere of influence, a particular rarefied world where power was currency and disruption, sometimes a lucrative tool. Your gut, a compass itself, swung north. It led you with a grim certainty to the towering edifice of Sterling and Thorne. The address was etched into your mind, a beacon of corrupted light. Your past, a cloak of invisibility in some circles, became a key in others. The climb was metaphorical and literal, ascending through polished marble and hushed hallways until the air grew thin with money and ambition. You pressed yourself against the cool wall, a breath held captive in your chest, and peered through the narrow gap. Inside, the room was a panorama of the city, framed by floor-to-ceiling glass. The night sky, a velvet expanse, glittered with distant stars and the closer, harsher lights of the metropolis. Around a massive boat-shaped table, figures were seated, their faces etched with a grim intensity. The air crackled with a palpable tension, a storm brewing beneath the veneer of corporate calm. Her voice, when it cut through the murmurs, was an ice pick. "The market disruption is contained," she declared, her gaze sweeping across the grim faces. But the source remains a leak. You watched her, your focus a laser beam. Her fingers, adorned with a single massive emerald, tapped a rhythm against the polished surface. Your eyes darted to a small, ornate box on the table before her, a relic that seemed out of place amidst the sleek modernism. Creative destruction. This wasn't merely a business meeting. It was a council of war, discussing a battle that felt eerily aligned with the chaos the killer wrought. Your eyes, now scanning the room with renewed urgency, landed on a brief, almost imperceptible exchange. Then, the security chief, a man with eyes that missed nothing, shifted his weight. His head tilted subtly towards the slightly ajar door. He knew, or suspected. The air thickened, pressing in on you. You could feel the weight of his unseen gaze, a predator scenting its prey. The mahogany door seemed to groan in protest as you eased it shut, the soft click a thunderclap in your ears. Your heart hammered not with fear, but with the frantic rhythm of a ticking clock. The corridor, once a path to discovery, was now an escape route. You had seen enough, heard enough. The antique compass, the rare orchid, the obsidian fragment. They were not just signatures, but pieces of a puzzle that pointed directly to this world, to this woman, to this very room. The emergency call was about the consequences of the killer's actions, and the Titan's words hinted at a profound, disturbing familiarity with the architecture of that chaos. You hadn't just found a lead, you had stumbled into the very heart of the storm. The architect of chaos had a name, a face, and a powerful perch from which to command their destructive symphony. But connecting her to the brutal artistry of the murders, proving her complicity beyond the veil of corporate intrigue, would be a task far more perilous than mere infiltration. Your gaze, sharpened by the phrase creative destruction, now swept across the faces of the assembled executives, each a mask of calculated composure. These were the architects of ambition, the titans of industry. Yet one among them had twisted their corporate philosophy into a grotesque symphony of death. You felt the tremor of revelation begin, a low hum beneath your skin. Creative destruction. The killer's signature, a meticulously staged scene of ruin, mirrored in the very ethos of this company. His eyes, keen and unblinking, held a predatory glint as he listened to the current crisis unfolding. Another market segment dissolving, another competitor rising. He spoke of necessary sacrifices and trimming the fat, words that now echoed with a chilling double meaning in your mind. The head of security, a hulking presence by the door, shifted, his eyes scanning the room with a professional weariness that seemed to miss the deeper currents. The legal counsel, a woman with a severe bun and sharper intellect, scribbled furiously on a notepad, her brow furrowed in concentration. You saw their reactions, their anxieties, but none truly resonated with the cold precision of the crimes. Then, the CEO, a figure of silvered hair and iron will, pointed to a holographic projection of market trends. Our last acquisition, he stated, his voice a low growl, was meant to eliminate this very vulnerability. Instead, it became a drain. The chief strategist nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible curl of his lip. A necessary cleansing, then. Diseased limb. The bodies, found in states of ritualistic dismemberment, not merely murdered, but purged. The phrase, used so casually in this sterile environment, was a direct echo of the killer's twisted rationale, glimpsed in the careful arrangement of the victims. Your eyes narrowed, locking onto the chief strategist. It was a close call, that moment of shared eye contact, a brief, dangerous dance across a precipice. You broke away, feigning interest in the projected data, but your mind raced, connecting phantom threads. The company had been in the midst of a massive restructuring then, shedding assets, consolidating power. The victim, a vocal opponent of the acquisition, had been a diseased limb in the company's grand design. A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome, from a dusty file you'd revisited just days ago. A unique, ornate paperweight, crafted from a specific type of polished obsidian found near the first victim. It had been dismissed as a random trinket, but now your eyes swept the boardroom table. The air thinned around you, the boardroom shrinking, the voices of the executives fading into a distant drone. The obsidian paperweight. A custom piece, commissioned years ago as a corporate gift, limited in number. It wasn't a clue left by mistake. It was a signature, a boast. The chief strategist, a man obsessed with control and order, would never part with such a symbol of corporate identity, especially one that represented the very creative destruction he championed. He would see it as a trophy. The pieces clicked into place with an audible snap in your mind. He hadn't just understood creative destruction, he embodied it. He wasn't merely clearing obstacles. He was performing a twisted form of corporate purification, removing those he deemed weak links, diseased limbs. Individuals who stood in the way of his vision of absolute, ruthless efficiency. The killer you failed to catch years ago hadn't returned. He had never left. He had been here, all along, hiding in plain sight, crafting his masterpieces of ruin under the guise of legitimate business. Your jaw tightened. He wasn't driven by hate or revenge, but by a warped ideology of progress, a belief that some lives were expendable in the pursuit of a perfect, unhindered future for the company, and by extension, for himself. A quiet resolve settled deep within you. The game was no longer about catching a phantom. It was about confronting a meticulously disguised predator. You rose from your seat, the scrape of the chair a loud intrusion in the suddenly silent boardroom. Every eye turned to you, a collective question in their gaze. You met the chief strategist's eyes, a silent challenge passing between you, a promise of the storm to come. The hunt was over, and the true work was about to begin. The cold gleam of the penthouse boardroom's polished surfaces reflected a city indifferent to your torment. The words, "diseased limb," still vibrated in the air around you, a metallic taste on your tongue. A jolt, sharp and sudden, had coursed through you moments ago, connecting the fragmented clues into a horrifying, cohesive whole. Then, the emergency call blared. A jarring intrusion into the quiet dread, shattering the fragile silence. The massive screen at the far end of the boardroom flickered to life. The face of a junior security officer, pale and strained, filling the expanse. His eyes darted, a frantic energy radiating even through the digital interface. "Sir, a breach. Level 7. The old archive wing," he stammered, his voice tight with barely suppressed panic. We found a message, and the chairman's daughter. The ritualistic dismemberments, the purging. You remember the subtle hints, the victim profiles, not random, but connected by a thread of... What? A lineage? A legacy? The message, sir. It's carved into the mahogany desk in the chairman's old office within the archive wing. The blight must be excised. The tainted branch will fall. The tainted branch. It clicked, a brutal, undeniable logic. Not just a diseased limb, but the tainted branch. A family, a corporate empire. The previous victims were not random, but peripheral figures, distant relatives, minor executives, all with some perceived moral failing or connection to a past scandal that had touched this powerful entity. But now, the chairman's daughter, the very core of the tainted branch. The killer wasn't just targeting the periphery. They were going for the root. Next to the carving, an old photograph of a boy. Young Seth Corbin. A jolt, visceral and sharp, ripped through you. Your own name flung from the past into this terrifying present. The killer knows you, has always known you. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a twisted dialogue, a challenge laid bare. Your failure, your perceived complicity in allowing the blight to fester had marked you. The pieces coalesced with brutal clarity. The emergency call was a performance, a grand final act designed not just to eliminate, but to taunt. The killer wasn't just targeting the family. They were targeting you, too. You remembered the face of a young, intense man from the periphery of the old case files. A former junior executive, dismissed after a scandal that nearly brought down the entire firm. a scandal that had ruined his own family. The junior security officer pointed a shaky finger at the screen, a new feed appearing, raw and unedited. "Sir, a live camera feed. Old archive wing. She's there. And him. He's there." The image was grainy, flickering with the dim, sepia-toned light of the dusty archive silhouetted against shelves heavy with forgotten histories, poised over the bound form of the chairman's daughter. And in his hand, a gleaming, archaic blade, reflecting the faint light like a sliver of malevolent moonlight. The killer. It was the former head archivist, a man named Elias Vance. A man known for his meticulous records, his quiet, almost invisible presence. He was the one who had meticulously cataloged the corporate history, the family tree, the very blight he now sought to purge. He saw the diseased limb, not just in the victims, but in the entire corporate structure, a cancer he believed only he could excise. He was the one who held the keys to the corporation's hidden truths, the one who had watched its slow decay from the inside, the one who understood its genetic vulnerabilities. The penthouse boardroom was where the power resided, but the rot festered in the archives, the hidden histories. Vance was not just a killer. He was a self-appointed surgeon, meticulously charting the diseased path. Determination hardened your jaw, a frantic drumbeat thrumming beneath your ribs. You surged from the boardroom, the metallic tang of fear and adrenaline sharp in your mouth. The path was clear now, the killer's twisted logic laid bare. The old archive wing, a mausoleum of forgotten truths and buried sins. That is where he will complete his final bloody testament. That is where you will meet him. Your breath, a shallow thing, barely disturbed the polished mahogany table that reflected the city's distant, indifferent glow. The confession, not yet spoken but understood, had already begun to unravel the meticulously woven tapestry of your past failures, each thread now visible in the stark, unforgiving light. A tremor ran through the room, not of the earth, but of the collective realization dawning on the faces around you. Elias Vance. He walked with an unsettling calm, a briefcase clutched in one hand, his gaze sweeping over the assembled faces, lingering on yours with a peculiar, almost mournful intensity. "Elias," you uttered again, this time with a voice that felt carved from granite, stripping away the whisper. The other detective, her eyes sharp and unblinking, subtly shifted her weight, her hand instinctively moving towards the holster at her hip. The air crackled with a silent command, a shared understanding that the hunt, long and brutal, was about to reach its precipice. Vance offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Seth, always the ghost in the machine, aren't you?" His voice, smooth and unhurried, was a stark contrast to the coiled tension that gripped the room. "I suppose you've finally connected the dots." He set the briefcase on the table with a soft thud, a sound that resonated like a gavel strike. The emergency call was rather convenient, wasn't it? Gathered all the key players in one room. So much more efficient. The words, delivered without malice, yet carrying a chilling finality, confirmed your every suspicion. This was not a man cornered, but a performer taking his final bow. Efficient for what, Elias? You pressed, your gaze locking onto his, searching for the flicker of humanity beneath the veneer of meticulous cruelty. For the truth, Seth, the inconvenient, suppressed truth. He opened the briefcase. Inside, not stacks of cash or incriminating documents, but a series of worn, leather-bound journals and a single tarnished silver locket. He pushed them towards you, a gesture of surrender veiled as a revelation. They buried it, you know. Buried her. Buried the future. The other detective moved, swift and silent, her hand now firmly on Vance's arm. "Elias Vance, you're under arrest." Her voice was firm, professional, yet a tremor of disbelief laced its edges. He offered no resistance, no struggle. His eyes, however, never left yours. The corporation. They were experimenting. My sister. He was one of their early successes, or failures, depending on your perspective. She gained so much, but lost herself. The genetic vulnerabilities you had dimly perceived now took terrifying form. He wasn't just avenging a death. He was exposing a monstrous secret, systematically dismantling the lives of those he deemed responsible for his sister's fate. The locket, you realized, must have been hers. The patterns, you breathed, the subtle genetic markers at each scene. You were recreating the conditions of her disposal, weren't you? A macabre echo. A statement, Vance corrected, his voice hardening slightly. A legacy, to show them what they truly created, to force them to acknowledge the price of their hubris. He gestured vaguely at the journals. It's all there. Every experiment, every cover-up, every name. And a full confession, of course. I wanted to be understood, Seth. The killer wasn't a phantom, but a man driven by a sorrow so profound it had warped him into a precision instrument of destruction. Justice, in its rawest form, stood before you, apprehended not by force, but by the sheer, undeniable weight of his own truth. Uniformed officers materialized, their presence a stark, grounding contrast to the surreal calm that had settled over Vance. They led him away, his stride still even, his gaze still fixed on you until he disappeared from sight. A profound exhaustion, physical and mental, descended upon you like a shroud. You sank into one of the plush chairs, the leather cool against your skin. The hum of the city outside, once a distant murmur, now seemed to press in, a dull roar of indifference to the human drama that had just concluded. The other detective, her face etched with a mix of shock and grim satisfaction, approached the table. She picked up one of the journals, her fingers tracing the worn cover. He wasn't just a killer, Seth. He was a chronicler. This is bigger than any of us imagined. You nodded, the movement stiff. The corporation's genetic vulnerabilities were not just internal flaws. They were the very foundation of its insidious research, a secret kept for decades, now violently unearthed. Vance had, in his twisted way, delivered a form of justice, albeit one steeped in blood. The immediate threat was neutralized, the phantom killer finally given a name, a face, and a motive. The quiet hum of the penthouse boardroom, once a symbol of corporate power, now felt like the mournful echo of a buried truth, finally set free. Your journey had ended, but the world, forever altered by Elias Vance's brutal revelations, had just begun its reckoning. Fluorescent lights hum with an almost malevolent intensity, reflecting off the polished obsidian table where faces, once composed, now contort with an unmasked panic. The air, usually thick with the scent of expensive coffee and ambition, now carries the metallic tang of fear and the acrid whiff of impending ruin. You watch them, the corporate executives, their voices rising and falling in a frantic, overlapping chorus from the speakerphone at the table's center. Each voice, a distinct tremor in the global network, speaks of stock plunges, legal repercussions, the unraveling of decades of meticulously woven deceit, the genetic vulnerabilities, a phrase once whispered in hushed, guarded tones, are now screamed across headlines, blasted from digital screens, a cancerous blight on their empire. Vance, in his final desperate act, had not merely exposed a secret. He had detonated a truth bomb, the shrapnel still tearing through the very fabric of their existence. Your own reflection stares back from the darkened glass, a man etched with the exhaustion of a long war, yet something else too. A quiet clarity. The weight of the past, the phantom killer, the career sacrificed, the reputation shredded, all begin to lift, not entirely. Enough to breathe again. The public outcry is unprecedented. The head of legal affairs booms from the speaker, his voice cracking like dry timber. The connections to the vanished individuals, the experimental protocols. It's all out. We had contingencies, layers of insulation. You offer no reply, merely observing the spectacle of their self-immolation. Their contingencies were built on lies. Their insulation, a fragile membrane against the inevitable rupture of truth. The justice Vance delivered, though steeped in a crimson tide, had forced open the floodgates. The world now saw what you had glimpsed in fragments, what had haunted your sleepless nights. Seth Corbin. He's being hailed as an unexpected hero in some circles, the one who kept digging. The words hang in the air, a dissonant chord in their symphony of despair. You feel the shift, a subtle recalibration of gazes. The initial suspicion, the thinly veiled contempt, begins to recede, replaced by a grudging acknowledgement, perhaps even a flicker of awe at your relentless pursuit. They had dismissed you, broken you, yet here you stand, a silent witness to their downfall, an architect of their forced reckoning. A junior analyst, surprisingly composed amidst the chaos, clears his throat. The public statement needs to be carefully worded. Acknowledge the irregularities, express profound regret, and emphasize our full cooperation with the authorities, especially regarding the former detective Seth Corbin's invaluable assistance in uncovering these tragic events. The phrasing, slick and corporate, is designed to spin the narrative, to co-opt your work into their damage control. Yet the underlying message is clear. Your name, once synonymous with disgrace, is now being carefully restitched into the fabric of official narrative, albeit for their own strategic purposes. It is not a complete exoneration, not a grand parade, but a quiet, grudging restoration. A partial mending of the threads that once unraveled your life. Later, as the emergency call finally concludes, leaving behind only the lingering scent of desperation, a lone figure remains. His face, usually impassive, carries a new weight. "Seth," he says, his voice low, devoid of its usual clipped authority. "The department head. He wants to speak with you. Officially. About a consultation role. Reviewing old cases, unsolved, with a fresh perspective." You turn from the window, from the glittering cityscape that once represented their unreachable power, now a landscape of their crumbling empire. The offer hangs in the air, a path back, not to the old life, but to something new, something forged in the fires of your ordeal. It is not the badge, the uniform, the unquestioning trust you once held, but it is a purpose. A different kind of purpose, perhaps more profound, more independent. The experience has etched itself onto your soul, an indelible mark. They are part of you now, a somber tapestry woven into the fabric of your being. But the haunting, the suffocating shroud of failure begins to dissipate. You nod slowly, the movement unburdened by the crushing weight of the past. The city lights twinkle below, a vast, indifferent ocean of human endeavor. You are not whole. Perhaps you never will be. But you are no longer broken. A new beginning, not clean, not easy, but resolute. The phantom killer has been unmasked, his corporate architects brought to their knees. And you, Seth Corbin, stand at the precipice of a future shaped by the ghosts you finally laid to rest, and the quiet, persistent hum of justice yet to be served.